Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well,
Good.
ready and raring to go.
Did you survive the mosquitoes over the weekend?
No, I didn't quite do it. I had to put a spray on this weekend.
It was bad. It is bad out there.
Did you know there were mosquitoes in Lake Jackson before you moved here?
It was a swarm. I mean,
Yeah.
You couldn't see the sun.
Actually, I'm amazed how well they do to keep a little control of them.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about keeping control on those people who love lockdowns.
Yes.
I think we're making progress.
Yeah.
I guess we can't take any credit for some of this, maybe a little bit. But there's a tone that's changing. You know, the people who've been preaching, yes, 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 if you don't do it, you're a heathen. I mean, you're unpatriotic, and you're the most evil person in the world, and you're participating in murder, you know, if you don't follow all the lockdown rules. But we started off, we had one item about who flip-flops on this, but all of a sudden, I said, Daniel, I have another one, and you'd come up with another one. I think we have about 6 items there, but the theme is basically the same, and you wonder how a light bulb turned on all at once. We don't have to worry about it because the light bulb is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. They're moving in our direction, which is something that they haven't done before. So there's some good items here that where the people who promoted all this lockdown and all this government intervention have taken a different view on this. But the one on that we want to start off with is who they flip-flop, urges world leaders to stop using lockdowns to fight COVID contagion. Well, is that one of us that said that? No, that's who.
Yeah.
Who is the who that promoted all this nonsense? But, you know, in looking at all these items that we have, some of them sort of aren't totally up front. They say, well, I really didn't believe this, and we were doing this thing, and it doesn't matter if they want to soften their tone just as long as they're moving in our direction. And this, I think, is very, very good, and I think the American people have something to do with it. And one of them, I may quote this later on, one individual quoted, they say, well, the people are tired of it, and the politicians can't get together on it, which makes the point. You know, if the people object, they usually can change it. People and the people of a country have the type of government that they tolerate too long. I think the tolerance level is going down. I think that's good.
Yeah, and I think we might be seeing them moving into damage control after endorsing, as you say, lockdowns and endorsing continued lockdowns. Even in May when they started opening, the WHO said, don't you dare open. But we're talking about Dr. David Nabarro, and he's a UK envoy to the World Health Organization. And he's not necessarily completely come our way, but he's recognizing the obvious. But we do have to give him some credit for being brave, because he broke ranks not only with Tedros, the WHO leader, you know, the Ethiopian communist, but he also broke ranks with the UK government, his own government, which is in the process of re-locking down the society. And he appealed to the world leaders. This was a meeting that just took place over the weekend. He appealed to world leaders. This is a great quote, and we have it in the headline. These lockdowns are causing a ghastly global catastrophe. Stop using lockdowns as a primary control mechanism for coronavirus, he said. He has not embraced the great Barrington statement, the idea of herd immunity, but he's looking around and he's noticing that the lockdowns are a catastrophe. And he points it out that it's costing more lives than COVID. The lower paid workers, the people working on the oil rigs or you know, the blue collar workers, the waitresses, they don't have the luxury of, you know, you can't be a waitress when you're sitting at home, right? And they're just getting hammered by this. It's causing terrible problems.
And we'll give them one little benefit of the doubt. It probably is an unintended consequence because they can't ever believe that their policies won't do exactly what they expect it to do. But they probably didn't set out to do that, so obviously, because it's so disastrous. But now that it's here, they're waking up. But I think that, that there's good reason for it. And that, again, I want to go back to the people waking up. And, you know, Dr. Gottlieb has been strong in this position, too. And he has a quote out about this after who flip-flop, former FDA chief says, no reason for another round of lockdowns.
Yeah, yeah.
But the quote that I want to read here is Dr. Gottlieb says, I think the idea that we're going to do national stay-at-home orders or even broad stay-at-home orders in select cities is just not going to happen. The popular will isn't there for it, and the political leaders on a bipartisan basis aren't going to support it. See, this is the answer to how you try to bring about changes. If there's a totalitarian society, which we should fear all the time, it takes a tremendous amount of popular pressure. But I still think we live in an age where if the people speak out, and there's more and more people just, going into the stores now and resisting, with this change, this is going to be even more encouragement. But I think this is a very important statement. Popular opinion, they get the message for political reasons and just because the people are standing up for what they believe in.
As our good friend Joe Celente always says, when people have lost everything and they've got nothing left to lose, they lose it. And they lose it, and they're not going to take it anymore.
Right.
And Gottlieb, as you say, he was on Squawk Watch on CNBC this morning. But he's doing damage control again. He's saying, no, the WHO's not flip-flopping. This isn't what you're seeing,
Right.
But he admits it. But, Dr. Nabarro, he clarifies the use of the lockdown. Now you tell us, right? The only time a lockdown is justified is to buy time, to reorganize, to regroup, and to rebalance your resources, which is what they promised us in the beginning. Remember, 15 days to flatten the curve. But now he has recognized that these lockdowns are doubling world poverty, they're doubling child malnutrition, and they are literally causing more lives to be lost than the virus itself.
And this may have a political significance. I know we're about to have the election in a couple weeks, but there may be now, and this might be the reason we're getting this, is if this is on the people's mind and they're sick and tired of it, if there's any undecideds left out there, this might be the big issue, are the lockdowns. So this might be a sign that there's a shift in attitude and may play a role in the election.
I would say it puts Biden in a bind because he has staked out the position, I'm the lockdown candidate. He said explicitly, I will have a nationwide mask mandate, and I would shut it all down, quote unquote, shut it all down if the science tells me to. And with Trump trying to position himself, doing his best, positioning himself as the open it up candidate, as the we can get through this, do not be afraid candidate, I think Biden is in a bind. And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, Dr. Paul, but they held a rally. Biden held a rally in Arizona, and the media was there to cover it, and there wasn't a single person that showed up. So. But what's interesting is that the other thing, just talking about Trump, what we're talking about him is, Trump tweeted over the weekend. He said, hey, I'm over the COVID. I'm no longer contagious. I'll never get it again. Twitter censored him, saying that he was lying. Well, they asked Gottlieb about that this morning on the TV, and he reluctantly said, yeah, that's probably true. He's probably not contagious anymore. So it's interesting how they don't want this to get out. Once you get it and get over it, and you're not sick and you don't die like Trump was supposed to do, you're no longer contagious and you'll never get it again.
I guess there's always exception to some of the rules, but in my mind, I never thought that you could turn the switch on and off again. Oh, I'm immune today and I have immunity. Oh, tomorrow I don't have any immunity, this sort of thing. So I think they're going to have a hard time trying to prove that Trump's infectious again and is going to infect the world.
Well, who also got over it, by the way, is Chris Christie. And someone pointed out, a friend of ours pointed out, that if Chris Christie gets COVID and gets over it, this is officially over. If he can, this guy is the walking comorbidity in the country, and he got over it. So
yeah,
we want to actually let's look at a couple of we're getting behind we're talking ahead of ourselves, but let's look at a couple of our clips just to kind of keep up with what we're saying. Here is this is the Dr. Nabarro who made that point. But let's move on to our next topic, which is the next picture, and this is also very interesting. This is from Off Guardian, a very good publication, who accidentally confirms COVID is no more dangerous than the flu. And of course, they're going to go nuts. If we put this in the headline, they probably would attack us. But this really, and I'm not a great math guy, this really is simple math, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the infectious rate and the deaths from this, which should be the bottom line, are so much improved. And I think that It's just too bad that this doesn't make the head news, the news in the evening. But you got to give credit to Fox.
Yeah.
They have been good on this issue.
Laura Ingraham and Tucker, good.
Yeah,
yeah.
They are. And they have a significant audience. There's no doubt about it. And they're going to feel good if all of a sudden their liberal competition has to concede a little bit.
Concede a little bit.
And even if it's subtle, it's still a good thing. But this was one of the arguments that I've always wanted to use early on. But this one gives some statistics on it. Is the fact that we go through flu season all the time, and nobody pays any attention to it. And a lot of them, the Gateses of the world, they want to have flu treated like the coronavirus, not the real coronavirus, but the fictitious coronavirus. And that is, they're looking into the next season. They probably know this is not quite as bad as they said. So they're trying to get ready to condition the people that there will be another virus. And Gates was on. His smugness is pretty annoying. He says, well, yes, looks like we're going to have to adapt for 2 more years. We can't handle it. Well, the statistics now, and a few people who are tired of it, they're not going to wait 2 more years to be able to go out and eat their dinner out.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's so corrupt about it is that you have to follow the CDC. They are God. If you go against them, you will hate science. But the number one funder of CDC is Gates himself. So, I mean, how can you have an objective organization with clearly someone with an agenda? Gates has an agenda. He's not shy about it. And here they're the ones. So your salary depends on whether Bill Gates you agree with Bill Gates or not.
If you understand it that way, you'd have to say, there has to be a couple people still at the CDC that's willing to at least leak out the truth, and a lot of people have become annoyed with the CDC, and the fact that they question it is very important. I mean, before they used the CDC in a political sense and pumped up the people and frightened and terrorized the people, nobody really paid much attention to it, and yet a lot of people pay attention to it now. So I think that's one of the benefits.
It's like you've said, there is a virus, there is the disease, and it can be deadly to people. Then there's this whole other thing, this lockdown mentality.
Which now is more deadly than the virus.
More deadly than the virus. But just circling back on this whole equation, this math thing, and this is important because this is not just an open, empty, blank statement. There was a special session of the World Health Organization's Executive Board last week. Dr. Michael Ryan, he's the head of emergencies for the World Health Organization. He made a statement, and we did cover it last week, that the WHO believes that 10% of the world has been infected by this particular strain of the coronavirus. Previously, they had estimated only 35 million. But with a world population of 7.8 billion people, according to their own estimate, that means that 780 million people have been infected with this particular strain of the virus. With a death toll of just over 1 million people, even as inflated as it's been, that gives you an infection fatality rate of 0.14%, which is on par with the seasonal flu. But the initial estimate that closed the entire world down was that it was a 3.4%. So the reality is that it has a 25%, or 24 times lower infection fatality rate than they originally claimed.
And some people initially saw that the infectious rate being high and saw it as just really, really bad news, but it turns out it's really good news. There's a lot of people out there that have gone through it. They're not sick, they're not dying, they're not in the hospital, and maybe there's going to be more immunity than anybody ever dreamed of. So those are the statistics that in time somebody's going to really do some detailed comparisons to influenza and the coronavirus. And of course it's coming slowly, but that's exactly what we're getting hints of, that they're admitting that we were claiming that you can't, well, 2 things. I never thought we should be able to trust the testing.
Yeah.
There's too many stories about them being inconsistent, and you never could trust the statistics because they fudge the statistics, and they've changed definitions of the statistics, and they always made it, and you just already pointed out, where the predictions were wrong. Now, there was that one time when the prediction was so bad and they missed a decimal point, but you often wonder how that happened. If it were just a mistake, that's a major mistake.
Yeah.
Somebody should have caught it. Or if it were deliberate, they had to go to prison, you
Yeah.
know, for why are you doing this if you're doing it on purpose? People die because of this calculation, and they're still suffering. They're getting sick now just from the treatment. And boy, I hear so many stories about bad reactions to the masks.
Yeah.
Especially
Oh, yeah.
especially the kids. The kids, I hear a lot of the stories because we have some teachers in our family and they teach little kids, and it's such a shame. The kids can get so tired of their masks they have to beg the teacher, I need a break. Can I
Yeah.
go outside for 10 minutes? That is just
Child
unreal.
abuse.
As if you were exposing them to something terrible, and all they're doing is trying to struggle to have some fresh air instead of breathing through those masks. But hopefully that'll change.
Well, the other thing, and you've talked about this a lot, is the ridiculousness of the schools and what's happening. And even here in Texas, the part of the day over here, part of the day over here, no one knows what they're doing. Put them out in the yard with masks on. That's nice. But now we're getting some. This is a sort of Good News Monday, isn't it?
Right.
Because now we're getting some more good news in way. In the first clip, let's look at our next one. This is from The Atlantic. The Atlantic hates Trump. The Atlantic loves lockdowning. They're very much aligned with the left. But, as you always say, there are occasionally honest, good people. And this is an economist at Brown University, Emily Oster. She wrote a fascinating article called Schools Aren't Super Spreaders. Remember, oh my gosh, we can't open the schools. Everyone will die. Well, she's a scientist. She crunched all the numbers, and she found out that there was no increases in places where schools were opened. Not at all. But this is what we really want to talk about. There's a new study. The University of Edinburgh did the study. It's been published in the British Medical Journal. Look at this next clip. This is even worse. Closing schools could increase the COVID death toll, and herd immunity could save more lives. Strict lockdown study says. This is a fascinating new study that's come out. It's been peer reviewed. And it looked back at the original data of the Imperial College, which all of the shutdowns, all of the school closures were all based on this. They reran the numbers, and they found that it's completely wrong, and exactly the opposite is the case.
You know, in the Atlantic article, there's a quote here I want to read. Virtual school is available, but attendance levels are not up to par. Wouldn't that be the understatement? But the last phrase is, pediatricians have linked remote schooling to toxic stress. And that's probably an understatement too. I mean, the description of that, it can be pretty serious. But then, I don't know if it was this article, but somebody else was writing about that, and they added on, and there's toxic stress for the parents too.
Yeah.
You know, because they're doing it, their job becomes more stressful, but their job is duplicated because they have to worry about the stress of their kids,
Yeah.
and they feel so helpless. So, and that might be the reason that the attitude is changing, because the people's attitudes are changing, and we'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully every week we can see a lot more opening up, and maybe the kids can go back to school much sooner than they had planned.
It's starting in Texas. There are several counties now that have got rid of online only education. But, you know, this goes back to what you always say, which is the war on the middle class, thanks to the Fed, because most families now, they have to have two incomes to survive. And so now the kids at home, you having a hard time making your ends meet anyway, and you're just adding to the disaster.
No, there's no doubt that you can't separate this social nonsense that's going on in the schools from the financial problems that people are facing in this country. And there's also still something I've mentioned many times is the big picture. Because I was participating not too long ago in a little seminar on this, and I thought it was, you know, average conservatives and all, but they all agreed that the big problem was the coronavirus and the lockdown, which is a big one. But they never once would concede the fact that maybe there was a gross distortion of the economy even before coronavirus hit, because some of the signs were there at the end of last year, and but the combination there is atrocious. We have the lockdown, we have the radicalization of Black Lives Matter and what's going on in the street, and then we have this lockdown. But this is one place. This is a lot easier to correct than correcting the evils and the stupidity of our Federal Reserve.
That's true.
I wish it were that easy. It's easy, but it's not as acceptable. People are not going to accept the fact, you mean you want the Fed to print less money? We want them to print a lot more money.
Free stuff. Well, going back to the study, and let's put on the next clip. This is an actual clip of the study that was published by the British Medical Journal. It was accepted by the journal on 15 September 2020, so very, very new. Let's look at the next one. This is the operative quote. This is the conclusion of this big study about schools. Let's click over to that next one. The model predicted that school closures and isolation of younger people would increase the total number of deaths. That's amazing. And here's more of the conclusion. 3 other things are important. More overall deaths. They also concluded that social distancing reduces death when practiced only in the over 70 population. That's what we've been talking about. And the third one, here's a quote, and it's worth, I think, repeating the quote. The findings of the study suggest that prompt interventions were shown to be highly effective at reducing peak demand for ICU beds, but also prolonged the epidemic, in some cases resulting in more deaths long term.
And I see the problems developing. Not only do we talk about the economy in general and the Federal Reserve and the weakness in the economy, but it's also this whole principle of managed care, government care. Sweden has done so much better than the rest they have done, but they also treated their elderly people, as far as they were concerned, in a caring way, where they made sure they got into a nursing home to give them proper medical care. It turned out it was the wrong thing to do. So this might be, the one area where people are going to learn, something from it, and even with the intervention, they might be a little bit smarter. Of course, I think these things can be sorted out much better when there's a private source of information and never having the bureaucrats running our medical deal. Because right now what people are looking forward to is going to be, the financial problems with government control of medicine. And that's happening whether it's Republicans or Democrats. There's way too much. And that's where the controls get. And I think you've noticed that when the government's involved in making all these kinds of decisions, they usually make a few mistakes along the way.
Yeah. I think Sweden would be the first to admit that they made some big mistakes. And one of them is what happened to the older folks in the nursing homes. Part of that's cultural, as you say. They have a cultural, thing where they send them off, and that's maybe not the best thing. Maybe go back to an earlier way of dealing. But here's something that I wanted to bring up, Dr. Paul, because I know you're going to have a comment on this. Because if you remember, we were praising Governor DeSantis last week or a couple of weeks ago for saying, you know what, forget it. I'm opening up Florida. You cannot hassle anyone about their masks. Everything is open. We're going to have stadium concerts. Forget about it. It's done. It's over. Well, look at this. Now it's 2.5 weeks since he's done that. No spike in Florida coronavirus cases despite lack of enforceable masks. If what he did was so monstrous, in 2 weeks we should see a pretty serious spike in Florida. They should be, if not dropping like flies, at least looking bad. Well, let's look at the numbers, which I follow every day very closely. Let's look at the next one. The numbers for Florida. There is no spike in Florida. It's plateaued. It's going down slightly, but you're not seeing the kind of spike that you should see if, oh my gosh, DeSantis just wants to kill people.
Right. I wonder if anybody's been following the number of people that get to the beach. I know a few people from Florida, and they like beaches.
Oh, yeah.
They have a lot of nice beaches. I can just imagine there's been a lot more people at the beach. And I've been impressed, and I think I've learned a little bit about vitamin D recently, that things can change quickly. I mean, you don't have to be in the sun for 10 hours to see a blip up with your vitamin D. So even a couple days might be helpful to the people. Not only that, it would help you psychologically Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have this burden of what can I do now, and who's going to pester me now if I want to go to the store? Where's my mask? So psychologically and medically, I think it's a big improvement. The governor deserves a lot of credit.
And I wish a few other governors would take heed. But you mentioned Sweden earlier, and our good friend Bob Wenzel, of course, of Target Liberty, which you must read every day. He put this up. This is a tweet he put up today, and I thought it was so great that I just wanted to put it up. This is Sweden today. If we can put up that tweet, this is that picture. This is Sweden today. Sweden will never need another lockdown because but the first lockdown to begin with. How are other lunatic countries going to climb down this tree? When does it stop? What's the end game? And here's a picture. I guess this person was in Sweden touring it, and he had several pictures like this of people living absolutely normal lives with no masks on, going about their daily business, and literally there are very, very few, almost zero deaths in Sweden.
It still amazes me, it disturbs me, and it makes me unhappy about it. But let's say somebody did that, they slipped off in this country and did that, and they were doing really, really well. They could be condemned viciously and hated for it. What are you doing? You're making it more dangerous for me. You're spreading the virus. And they get hysterical over that reaction. It was much more excessive than I ever dreamed. That is a natural thing. Somebody thinks, well, if I have to do it, they have to do it. But this has been pretty vicious. And they'll complain. It isn't like it's a friend of yours or something, you make a friendly suggestion of what you believe, but this is just shouting at the people they haven't even met because they see them, you're spreading your diseases like that. So let's hope we get over this and that passes by where we won't have to have strangers yelling at us.
Well, we may have invited it, but I took the kids out again in Lake Jackson here to protest the masks and the lockdowns and telling us to open up Texas. We had several people come by with a middle finger up at us, saying some choice words, but mostly we had a lot of friendly people honking. But here's what happens when you go the opposite of DeSantis. Remember, we talked about this. This is, well, ended with a laugh if we're ready to close. We talked about Governor Newsom, California governor. The guy is completely off his meds. He's insane. He said you got to put a mask on, take it off and take a bite at a restaurant, and then put it back on. And then here he is over the weekend. Let's put this last picture up. Here's Newsom. Please don't go. Governor Newsom pleads with Californians to stay. He wonders why everyone is in racing to get out of his state. It's run by a bunch of lunatics. So I just want to close again by reminding everyone of Dr. Paul's new book. I'll have some details in the description here on how you can get your free copy as a thank you for supporting this show. And I do also want to say our super chatters, I sometimes forget, we love you, you're great, you keep us going. We're going to thank you after the show. We're going to scroll your names again. James Cabral, all the rest of you, thanks so much for making a donation as we do our best to try to keep you informed and maybe entertained a little.
Very good. And I'd have to admit that I feel pretty good after this program because we did talk about several things. And the reason why I feel good about it, I think it's a significant change in direction. But I do get some grief from people who are friends and they call me a little bit too naive. You can't find any goodness on what's going on today. Well, I'll tell you what, if you can't change things immediately, you're more miserable if you just say, well, I can't do anything and moan about it. But if you can find some things, and the other thing that I've always talked about, especially in campaigning, is that even if you can't have the immediate benefits of change in direction, you should have the immediate benefits of identifying and working with and communicating with people like-minded. And this especially should be the case. I mean, if you're dealing with solutions that are local at home and trying to overcome the things that the government's done, there is a chance that you can actually make new friends and do better. But I hope I have the right balance on that because I think we're in a big mess. But I also think that we shouldn't be despondent. And the one thing that has kept me from getting despondent over this is the one conviction I have is that I really believe the message of liberty can provide so many answers, whether it's coronavirus, whether it's Black Lives Matter and their radicalism, or whether it's the Federal Reserve. The answers are out there and they're not complex. And when the time comes, like we pointed out today, the time has come. Some people just said, well, the people don't like this and the politicians are going to have to do it, and they change their position. So that's a good sign, and we'll keep working on that because our goal here is to be very sincere and work hard at promoting the whole concept of peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.